Hello, I'm Michael Harris with another edition of Indiana Roadside Markers, and today I'm in Fort Wayne, Indiana at the corner of St. Joe and East State Boulevards, and probably the most difficult historical marker I've ever had to find. The home of inventor Philo T. Farnsworth. Maybe you've heard of him, or maybe you haven't, but there isn't a whole lot of way you could be living on the planet Earth and not know of his most famous invention. The marker reads, Home, 1948 to 1967 of Philo T. Farnsworth, inventor of the television. Farnsworth, 1906 to 1971, was instrumental in perfecting the image formation mechanism, which enabled the first effective image transmission in 1927. Farnsworth Radio and Television Corporation in Fort Wayne from 1938 to 1949. It's unfortunate indeed that Farnsworth receives far too little credit for perhaps the most impactful invention of our time. He conceived the idea as a boy of 14 while growing up in Rigby, Idaho, drawing his earliest concept of his invention on his high school chemistry teacher's blackboard. He was born in Indian Springs, Utah, and he grew up there about the turn of the century, before many of the inventions that we take as commonplace today, and at a time when electric power was still not available in most homes. It wasn't until 1927 that he finally perfected his invention sufficiently to make his first electronic transmission. Like many inventors, Farnsworth was a true visionary, perceiving that television could be used for social discourse and global change, and he hoped that it would increase literacy. Farnsworth's wife, Elma, also known as Pem, described Philo as a man of intuitive thinking, logic, and hard work. This intuitive thinking led him to assemble a team of like-minded thinkers and set out to make the connection between seemingly unrelated elements into new instruments of amazing effectiveness. Pem also gives us a glimpse into the concept that she saw developing in her husband's mind. His image detector tube manipulated electrons, changing a visual image into a stream of electric current, transmitting that to another vacuum tube at the receiver, and on a fluorescent screen he could turn the current back into a transmitted visual image again. Attending Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah for a short time in 1923, he met the men who would help him finance his startup company, George Everson and Lindsay Gorell. Financial backing in hand, he moved to San Francisco, where he opened his first lab with a select team of scientists and inventors. At the height of Prohibition, unusual activity was suspect. The movement of men and packages in and out of his lab was one such activity which attracted their attention. It was not hard to imagine how suspicious our operation must have looked to those on the outside, recalls Pem. Pem's brother, a glassblower, was also part of the team that helped develop the first image dissector bulbs. On September 27, 1927, with Cliff in the transmitting room and Farnsworth in the receiving room, the first image was successfully transmitted. Farnsworth's telegraph to financier Gorell was reflective of his excitement. The damn thing works! Making the invention commercially viable, however, was another matter, and his investors were growing impatient. They wanted to see their money back, and in response, Philo, who apparently did not lack a sense of humor, met with his investors in 1928 and was able to capture their continued support at least for a short time thereafter by transmitting an image of a $sign to the receiver screen in front of them. With looming financial concerns, lawsuits, and protests by radio actors fearing that their jobs would be lost if television ever took off, in 1930 Farnsworth invited Dr. Vladimir Zworykin, a Russian scientist who had attempted his own experiments with television years earlier, to a meeting. Farnsworth thought that Zworykin still worked for Westinghouse and hoped to gain funding for his company. Zworykin, however, had his own agenda, and following their meeting duplicated Farnsworth's transmission system and made a deal with RCA. This led to a lawsuit with numerous appeals, which threw Farnsworth into a tailspin and deeper into depression and substance abuse. Pulling himself back together, Farnsworth moved to Fort Wayne, where he established a manufacturing facility, the Farnsworth Television and Radio Corporation, in the former Capehart Phonograph Building, hoping that the Capehart name would add credibility to his company. The year Farnsworth opened his Fort Wayne operation, 1939, was also the dawn of World War II, and the company's manufacture of radios, phonographs, and television equipment was highly efficient. This newfound success breathed new energy into Philo's men, and in turn, their reciprocation kept him on his toes. According to Pym, it also brought large financial gains to Fort Wayne. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt soon declared that all television and radio materials should be converted to military use. With military contracts, Farnsworth Television and Radio Company expanded throughout Indiana, with 7 facilities at the height of the war, including facilities in Marion, Huntington, and Bluffton. Donald Sinish, a Farnsworth researcher, said that the company's manufacturing facilities were rapidly converted to the production of military equipment and engineering channeled to the development of radio communications, missile guidance, and radar systems. Even so, Farnsworth's success was bittersweet. The war brought him no closer to seeing television turn into a broadcast medium, and with his patents expiring several years later in 1947, he was unable to commercialize on his efforts. Discouraged, he soon moved to Maine, vowing never to return to Fort Wayne again. He relented, however, returning to Fort Wayne a short time later to help repay the company's war bonds, and eventually sold the company to International Telephone and Telegraph, ITT. After the sale, Farnsworth stayed on working in research. Primarily with self-sustaining fusion, he hoped to usher in the high-energy era, but his efforts also furthered the national defense. Pym recalls that Philo developed a device for the United States early warning system to detect and destroy incoming planes and missiles. His fusion efforts, however, were not unnoticed. They gained solidarity early in 1947 when he received a phone call from Albert Einstein. Pym recalled that after the meeting, Phil's face was aglow with excitement of finding someone who understood what he was talking about. It was a great psychological relief for him to find another human being who shared his increasingly unique perspective, a fellow traveler in the rarefied regions of the physical universe where his mind now dwelt. Einstein, who had become disheartened after his own work had been used to create the atom bomb, encouraged Farnsworth to pursue his fusion work for peaceful means. By the time Farnsworth had developed his patented fusion reaction tube, Einstein had died. Depressed without an understanding friend, Farnsworth withdrew. He moved back to Provo, Utah, and continued his fusion experiments in concert with Brigham Young University. His concerns over whether humanity was spiritually ready for such an invention eventually led him to cancel the project, and according to family members, he carried the secret of fusion to his grave. Farnsworth was generally disappointed with the direction television eventually took. He only appeared on the medium once, on a television game show called I've Got a Secret. The shining light of his efforts, however, came when he watched the 1969 moon landing, remarking to his wife Pym, "This has made it all worthwhile." Dying in Salt Lake City, Utah on March the 11th, 1971, his life was perhaps best summed up by 2 quotes. One from a plaque which he kept on his desk, "Men and trees die. Ideas live on for the ages." The other from biographer Paul Scotskin, "There are only a few noble spirits like Philo T. Farnsworth who can alter the course of history without commanding great armies." From Fort Wayne, Indiana, and the home of Philo Farnsworth, I'm Michael Harris. Join me again soon for another edition of Indiana Roadside Markers. Additional information about Philo T. Farnsworth can be found on our website at www.indianaroadsidemarkers.com. And please like this episode and subscribe to our channel. Indiana Roadside Markers is produced by Sastoon Media, which holds the copyright.